Anyway, let's get into the papers, starting with the Ghanaian Times.
The Ghanaian Times, the first one and the biggest one, wailing, teeth gnashing at Ramsar site as more than 100 houses bulldozed as well. And President receives 24-hour economy policy draft. And of course, Supreme Court dismisses suspended Chief Justice injunction application as well. And reconstituted National Media Commission sworn in. There was another story which I think will interest you as well. Court adjourns Ken Oforiatta OSP case to June 18. These are the biggest stories in the Ghanaian Times.
Okay, we'll get back for the details. The Daily Graphic for today: tax exemption irregularities hold public officials accountable. Tax partner at PwC Abeku Jan Kwansa. Also, Supreme Court dismisses CJ's injunction application and borrow only for revenue generating projects. That's according to former Finance Minister Seth Tekbe. And Professor Akuya Brichum chairs 18-member NMC. The back page says government approves 200 transformers for ECG. And also comes to the photograph from the West African Mining and Power Expo, and so the minister said this during that particular program. I was there, as MC and a moderator. Assemblies engage traditional leaders to resolve land disputes is also on the back page, which means we can now get to the online news review. Let's see what's making news online this morning. Now, myjoyonline.com this morning says, please probe alleged assault on multimedia group journalist as Latif during Wuntumi's arrest. The other stories here says
Ghana's embassy in Washington reopens following IT overhaul and staff restructuring. And as well, Parliament must rise above pettiness, prioritize national interests. And this is from the Speaker of Parliament. And as well, Wuntumi spends night in Iyoko custody after failing to meet bail conditions. And government renames UHAS after late Professor Mills. And another one which I think I can bring to you. Parliament set to reintroduce anti-LGBTQ plus bill.
Okay, the bit about the naming of universities after people. Look, University of Health and Allied Sciences was established by Professor John Evans Atta Mills. It was during his tenure as president in the build-up to election 2008. He had made the point that he was going to establish a University for Health and Allied Sciences, University of Energy and Natural Resources. And so when he won, he did that. Okay, we've named University of Health and Allied Sciences after him. Are we going to name University of Energy and Natural Resources also after him because it was during his tenure that it was established? The point I want to make is this: enough of the renaming. Enough of renaming universities after people. If the university wasn't built from scratch, named after you, let's stop this renaming of universities. And for me, I was against renaming in the past, and I'll be against renaming of universities today. And so I do not have a problem, for instance, if you say a university like Apenting, Apiaminka, University of World Skills and Technology, Entrepreneurial Development, Amusted, or what. If you want to bring it back to the University of Education, Winneba Kumasi campus, or whatever, I don't have a problem with that. Or the University of Skills Training, I don't have a problem with that. If you want to change UDS, whatever, to University, I don't have a problem with that. So let's stop the renaming.
Okay. What about if we constructed new universities and then we want to name them after prominent people? The renaming is a problem.
Look, what we need, if you want to recognize the role Professor John Evans Atta Mills played in the establishment of the University of Health and Allied Sciences, you can have a center. Have a center named after Professor John Evans Atta Mills at the University of Health and Allied Sciences. It's simple. Let's do that. If you want to acknowledge SD Dombo, have a center named after him in that university. That would encourage research in honor of him or what he stood for. What's this thing of consistently trying to name? Is that the best way we can remember people? History would forever note that it was during his tenure that we established the University of Health and Allied Sciences, just as we know that the University of Sustainable Development in Somanya was under the tenure of, it started with the acquisition of loan under John Dramani Mahama. It continued. Why? These are things that, we all know. Must we name universities after people just to be sure that this is what it is?
I mean, just like policies where they're naming the Mahama Cares, which I think is also quite personal, naming not just institutions but policies as well after presidents who intend to, introduce policies. I also don't understand that. I think it's the same analogy and the point you're making.
You have a point, because the moment you do that, then eventually you're inviting others to come in and say, I want to review it, just because it has a name on it. Look, that's the universal access to medical to health and all of that. Again, even in that scheme, I still insist that if we do things well in this country, I do not in God's name understand how the National Health Insurance Scheme cannot take care of that. I don't understand it. Today we are asking people to contribute. Contribute to where? To what?
The sustainability of that fund, that fund is threatened. Yeah.
You see, you can actually do that. The National Health Insurance Scheme has enough funds. When was the last time you used the National Health Insurance Scheme?
Question.
I don't use the National Health Insurance Scheme. I contribute to the National Health Insurance Scheme. I understand the concept of insurance. All of us would come together and pay for those who need it. I have the multimedia group has a private insurance that I benefit from as an employee. So the contribution that I pay to SNID, that SNID transfers to the National Health Insurance Authority, would help others, which is understandable. When the 2.5% NHIL would help others, if we take good care of it, my sister, if we audit the National Health Insurance Authority very well, we would know that a lot of the things that happen there we can. Anyway, let's get to citynewsroom.com. Let's see.
Yes, this morning on City News, CJ removal can't be halted of Article 146 flaws, and this is by Martin Pebu. And I saw Ghana's embassy in Washington D.C. reopened today, and the big one, which will be their top story, Brian Achampon forms exploratory committee ahead of NPP flag bearer bid, and also Wontumi spends another night in Yoko custody over unmet bail terms as well, and fire ravages Maha Beach Resort, several structures destroyed. That's on citynews.com.
Well, in fact, when the NDC was in opposition, they said they were going to reverse the renaming of public universities. So you're going to reverse it by also renaming the remainder after others. Is that what you want to do? You want to rename you want to reverse the renaming of public universities? Go ahead. Don't go back and now say you're now going to be naming them, also renaming them. Please. I don't subscribe to that. Let's get into the details. Now, tax exemption irregularities hold public officials accountable. PwC tax partner. So, tax partner at PwC, Abeku Jan Kwansa. Now, he's called on Ghanaians to hold public officials accountable for tax exemptions granted to businesses. He explained that in spite of the passage of the Exemptions Act 2022 regulating the granting of tax waivers with key provisions allowing the state to take equity in companies that benefit from such waivers, such exemptions were being granted without transparency and at variance with the legal framework meant to guide the process. And this is a quote attributed to him. If you can't carry out a particular activity and you need the state to be part of the game, then the state is also saying that if your business valued at X, then give me a portion of X. And whenever you think you don't need it any longer, come back and buy it. It's that simple, isn't it? So he's saying we should be very careful about that. But also here, borrow only for revenue generating projects. And if I didn't tell you who said this, you probably would have known. One man who definitely would say this, that's Seth Tekbe. So he is advocating that, and the country needs to generate more revenue to cover its recurrent expenditure and not depend on borrowed funds for that purpose. That's the presidential advisor on the economy, Seth Tekbe. He said, now, Mr. Tekbe said that such an approach would help the nation to manage its debt sustainably and reduce the strain on its finances. He recalled that during the tenure as finance minister, the government had to curtail the consumption to build infrastructure, such as a turbo gas processing plant, the Terminal 3 at the Kotoka International Airport, and the expansion at the Tema and Takrady ports when the country was under an IMF program. I don't know if you remember the famous smart borrowing. What Setekbe did when he was minister was to get these state agencies with very good books to borrow on the back of their own account, or their own books. So you go and borrow. Yeah, you go and borrow. Government will guarantee, but it's your debt, so you pay for it yourself. It was a smart way of going around the whole thing, because then at the time we're under an IMF program, we had to be innovative, and that's how he did.
Would you say that system was more effective and efficient?
Well, that system should be is effective. Look, when you want to embark on a developmental, an expansion, for instance, you, an entity of state like the Ghana Ports and Harbour Authority, you must have your cash flows should be enough to say, I want to do this, and if you give me access to more funds to expand, I'll be able to generate more over this period and pay for it. It's that simple. Okay? You can do that. That's something that you should be able to do. And so I think it's the way to go. I don't think that the state should be borrowing all the time. Also on the front page here, Professor Ikuya Brichum chairs 18-member NMC. But of course, the back page, we're told that the government has given approval to the Electricity Company of Ghana to procure 200 new transformers to beef up the transmission and distribution of power to major cities in the country. The Energy and Green Transition Minister John Abdullah Jinapor made this known at the opening session of the West Africa Mining and Power Exhibition in Accra yesterday, and said following the approval by government, ECG had been asked to immediately inject new transformers into the system to ensure reliable supply of electricity for development. And when we're talking about smart borrowing, for instance, you have an entity like, say, ECG. So ECG should be able to take care of everything. Okay, and that's the way to go. If
government is going to guarantee such an institution like ECG, of course, it will still be government going to pay. That's how much you've lost trust in ECG, really. If that entity wants to go for a loan by itself, and then the government will be the one guaranteeing, really, I can only sit here and predict that it will still be our problem.
Well, government would at all costs come and guarantee. You need to, but I think that ECG could, on its own books, borrow and do all of these things. Yeah.
You want to take a minute to remember what Muhammad Dubik said when he came for an interview here, that containers can never really get missing in ports. They can be misplaced. Yeah. He seems to be vindicated quite.
Well, it's surprising how, you can actually, we said 1,300 or 400 containers were missing. We ended up finding 2,600.
Well, they also say that it's because of conflicting figures from day one during transition. Okay. So they still will put the blame on the previous government.
Okay.
Anyway, the Ghanaian Times this morning, wailing, teeth gnashing at Ramsar site as more than 100 houses bulldozed. Now, there was wailing and gnashing of teeth at the Sakumon or Ramsar sites in the Tema West municipality of the Greater Accra region as more than 100 buildings and fence walls erected on the wetlands were crushed down in a demolition exercise and backed by the authorities on Tuesday. Now, owners of some of the demolished buildings who could not stand the sight of years of sweat and toil came down in a flash of light, could be seen wailing and crying, while others even collapsed out of pain. In a rare feat of bravado, some of the affected landlords confronted the task force conducting the exercise in anguish, spitting fire on the authority who sanctioned the exercise. Now, yesterday we reported this on the midday news on TV. I recall that Kenneth JC brought us a live on that demolition exercise, and one peculiar story was a church building, which is reported to be the oldest building or structure on that land, the wetland. And that building is about 5 years. I think it's called the Gilga Church, and it will be that every time there's demolition, they get to win some empathy from the demolition exercise, and then the authorities will say, because you're a church, because of what you're providing to the community, maybe we give you some time.
Okay. Yesterday they demolished it.
Yesterday, what happened was that they started the demolition more like a phase one of it and gave them a week to pack out because the church said that they had some sick persons in the building, so they needed
sick persons in the church.
Yes.
Well,
I mean, you know, it's a religious culture in this country where persons seek health in church premises rather than go to the hospital.
Okay.
It's not
well,
new.
You know, I'm a very fair person.
Are you?
I like fairness.
Okay.
I like fairness. I preach and practice it, actually. In my case, I preach and practice it.
Okay.
So I think that it should have been fair. It would have been fair to also demolish the church.
They will. At least they've given them a week.
But were the others giving a week?
So the argument is that there were people not living in these structures that they had demolished.
But were they giving a week?
No, they weren't.
To probably take some of their wirings away? No. The church, when I say the church, whoever built that church should have done the right thing. When I say the church, is like generalizing it. That church should have done the right thing. The owner of that church should have done the right thing. Okay. What's the name of the church? If you know, I'll find the name of the church, because I do not think that if my
I'll
church,
find it for you.
If my church, the Methodist church, does that, whichever pastor went to do that, must be brought to book.
But they also say that they needed a land. They went to the traditional authorities that they wanted to build a church.
Did they register the land? The church must do that church must do the right thing. But MFI, there's this. I need to just put this out.
Okay.
That the traffic lights right in front of the police headquarters, the intersection and the right to Akwaje, left to Dankwa Circle, has not been working for 2 years. Yes, 2 years. And you have about 6 police officers who are placed there the whole day, every day, to direct traffic. How is that possible? Look, that traffic light in front of the police headquarters, the intersection right to Akwaje and to the left to Dankwa Circle, hasn't been working for 2 years now, I'm told. Please, Urban Roads, Ghana Police Service, fix that. Don't go and put 6 policemen to direct traffic. This is waste of productive hours. Anyway.
I found the church, correct. So, House of Gov't Prayer Ministry. House of Gov't Prayer Ministry. So at least they need some time to evacuate.
Oh, please.
Anyway, another one. Court adjourns Ken Oforiatta OSP case to June 18. That's also at the Ghanaian Times this morning.
Well, when I started the conversation this morning, I asked Daryl. I said that how about all of us debating and agreeing on where we want the cedi to dollar ratio. I mean the dollar to cedi. The president says at some point in time we need to make sure that we stabilize it at some point because it could also affect our exports and everything. I say, well, let's agree. Probably gets to 5.
5. What about 5?
Oh, you like 5 too?
5.
Okay, maybe you like 4. Maybe you like 3.
5.
Maybe you prefer 1 to 1. That wouldn't be bad at all. When we started this whole redenomination, it was actually 1 to 0.95. But